She mocked me as old and worthless. The judge's words moments later made her tremble. Diana Jennings adjusted the strap of her worn satchel as she walked down Cherokee Street, the early morning chill biting through her charcoal blazer. Every day, she told herself, this was just another step toward proving she still mattered at Larchmont and Brock Law. At 57, Diana knew eyes often slid past her in the office, sized her up as something old and out of place, but inside, she brimmed with quiet determination, fueled by a passion sharpened through decades of careful work. That morning was no different. Clutching a manila envelope labeled in her neat handwriting, Murray Family Trust, Clause D5, she stepped into the firm's labyrinthine corridors. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, and the faint scent of burnt coffee lingered near the break area. A few interns bustled past, glancing up with distracted smiles. Diana's hands trembled just slightly, not from nerves, but from the persistent ache in her fingers. At the door to the copy room, she hesitated a moment, then pushed it open. Inside, the usual whir of the copier filled the air, punctuated by the clatter of papers. Madison Crane leaned against the counter, her glossy dark ponytail swaying as she smirked. In front of two wide-eyed interns, Madison's sharp eyes locked on Diana. With a voice dripping in condescension, she said, "Careful, Diana, don't throw out your hip. These cases might be too heavy for you." Her laughter was soft, but laced with a cruel edge. Diana felt heat rush to her cheeks. The warmth wasn't just embarrassment. It was the sting of invisibility, the familiar echo of being underestimated. Yet she didn't snap back or retreat. Instead, she quietly tightened her grip on the envelope, fingers curling around the edges as if the paper gave her strength. The label, Clause D5, felt heavier somehow, a silent testament to the effort and precision she had poured into the case. This wasn't just paperwork, it was a lifeline. Madison's gaze flicked away for a moment. A hint of something. Was it uncertainty? Passing over her face before her confident mask slid back in place. The interns exchanged awkward glances, caught between amusement and sympathy, but no one spoke out. Diana's eyes landed on the small plaque on the wall, Larchmont and Brock Law, excellence through integrity. For years, those words had been her anchor. They reminded her that, no matter the jeers or doubts, her dedication had a place here. She straightened her shoulders and nodded once, faintly. No words, just the quiet promise that this wouldn't be the last they heard of her. Straightening her blazer, she stepped toward the copier. The hum filled the space again, and the smell of warm paper comforted her. Somewhere in the back of her mind, a small alarm rang. Thursday's hearing for the Murray case was fast approaching, and the document she carried, Clause D5, would be pivotal. The stakes were rising. But for now, the present was a sting. Madison's mockery floated in the air like a shadow, and Diana's heart beat steady with the resolve to turn this quiet humiliation into something no one here would forget. The first lines of a long story were drawn, and Diana was ready to write every page. The glass walls of the conference room gave Diana no shield from the eyes or the quiet judgment that hovered just beneath the surface. She stood steady beside the sleek mahogany table, her fingers lightly tapping her notepad as she tried to make sense of the scattered schedules on the screen. Her voice was calm, measured. The hearing prep timeline has a conflict on Thursday. The Murray case files haven't been updated with the latest amendment. She met eyes with Mr. Nolan, their demanding boss, but his expression remained unreadable. No nod, no correction. Before she could continue, Madison Crane's sharp voice cut through the quiet like a surgeon's scalpel, loud enough for all 10 attendees to hear. "I guess details slip as you age, Diana," Madison said with a sly smile, tapping her own tablet. "Maybe it's time to let the next generation take over these tedious tasks." The words hung in the air, heavy and dismissive, as a few people stifled smirks. Diana felt a flush creep up her neck, but she forced herself to breathe steadily. Her eyes darted toward the one face that offered a flicker of kindness. Kevin, the firm's IT technician, seated quietly in the corner, adjusting his glasses nervously. When their eyes met briefly, he quickly looked away, a flicker of apology in his hesitant glance that spoke volumes of the unspoken tension. The room was edged with pressure. Everyone knew the stakes. Thursday's review by Judge Beckman was looming, promising scrutiny that could make or break reputations. In the silence after Madison's jab, Diana's mind looped around the importance of the document she'd held so tight that morning, the Clause D5 that could shift the course of the Murray settlement. Her heartbeat felt amplified against the sterile pulse of the overhead lights, her grip on the pen tightening. Mr. Nolan shuffled his notes but said nothing to rein in Madison's biting remark. The absence of leadership stung almost as much as the insult. Diana caught herself before answering, aware that any misstep could feed the quiet narrative painting her as outdated and dispensable. A brief pause followed as the team checked their devices and exchanged glances. Diana's gaze dropped to her memo, the phrase, "due by Thursday, mandatory inclusion," circled in red ink. The firm's policy on case documentation management was strict. Every clause absolutely had to be accounted for before court. She reminded herself, this wasn't just a job, it was about maintaining integrity for the clients. Yet beneath the professional veneer, a genuine battle brewed within Diana. Was she on the way out, or could she prove her worth one more time? The room hummed with expectation, and as Madison's smirk grew wider, Diana became even more determined, not just to finish her work, but to make it impossible for anyone to overlook her again. Outside the conference room, the hum of the city continued, indifferent. But inside, in that glass box, Diana felt both the sting of dismissal and the flicker of defiance. The detailed files in her hands might just be the key, and as she took a steadying breath, she vowed to hold on to that hope, even if silence and smirks surrounded her. If a moment like this ever hit close to home, I'd love to hear how you found your way forward. 2 days blurred into long afternoons at Larchmont and Brock, and each time Diana tried to speak, her voice was swallowed. In small prep sessions for the Murray case, her detailed memos sat untouched on desks, buried beneath newer emails flagged urgent by Madison. Morning meetings passed with Diana holding her notes tightly, hoping this time someone would ask. But the conversation always veered away, like a sudden quiet after a lightning strike. One evening, long after most had left, Diana sat in the dim glow of her desk lamp, tracing the lines of case files sprawled before her. The office was silent but for the distant hum of the cleaning crew vacuuming near the elevators. Her fingers moved slowly over the paperwork, double-checking dates and signatures. The familiar scent of polished wood mingled with old printer ink, comforting, yet underscoring the empty room around her. For the first time, doubt crept in, a twisting knot in her stomach threatening to unravel everything. What if she really was invisible? What if this grudging sidelining meant it was time to stop fighting? Her breath hitched. That near-give-up moment was a stillness thick with quiet pleading. Could she find a foothold to climb back? The clock's minute hand seemed louder in the hush. Then, as she gathered her things to leave, soft laughter drifted through the hallway, sharp, brittle, unmistakable. Through the frosted glass panel, Diana saw Madison leaning close to a colleague, whispering with that smug grin. "She files our copies like it matters. Honestly, if she retired next week, nobody would notice." The words stung colder than winter's bite, echoing the fears she had fought to suppress. Heart pounding, Diana stepped back from the doorway, head bowed to shield the ache swelling in her chest. She made her way to the break room, where the dull hum of the refrigerator and the faint aroma of stale coffee greeted her. Sitting at the metal table, she let the tears come, fleeting but fierce. She wiped them quickly, refusing to become the story Madison wanted to write for her. Gathering herself, Diana returned to her desk to sort through the scattered files once more. Her eyes scanned each Manoa folder until they landed on an empty space where something important should have been. The folder labeled Murray Family Trust, Clause D5. The folder she'd filed meticulously last week was missing from the stack Madison was preparing for the team. Her breath caught. That tiny gap sparked a flicker of hope, a crack in the wall Madison had built around her presence. It was a clue whispered by absence, signaling an irreplaceable role no one had admitted Diana still held. Closing her eyes briefly, Diana's fingers traced the edge of the desk as if mapping the path forward. Tomorrow she would come prepared, not just with notes, but with proof. The fight wasn't over, not yet. When dignity finally speaks, who tends to listen in your world? Wednesday arrived with a weight that pressed down on every step Diana took through the firm's marble-floored lobby. Today was different. The usual hum of activity pulsed with an undercurrent of tension as the staff geared up for the final preparation of binders bound for Judge Beckman's courtroom. A small sign taped near the elevators read, "All hands on deck, trial materials due Thursday morning." That deadline echoed like a ticking clock in Diana's mind. She had barely set foot inside the conference area when Madison intercepted her, voice loud enough for the entire staff to hear. "Diana, maybe you should just stay out of the way today," she said, her tone sharp, clipped, leaving no room for argument. The phrase was a public dismissal, effectively relegating Diana to the sidelines, while the junior associate took the lead on assembling the pivotal case binders. Diana's breath caught, the sting of humiliation tightening around her chest like a cold chain. Her cheeks burned beneath the hushed whispers and sidelong glances from colleagues who couldn't decide whether to look away or watch. Emily from HR exchanged awkward glances with a junior partner down the hall, and there was no one to defend her, not even Mr. Nolan, whose neutral expression hinted at discomfort but no intervention. This was as close to invisible as she had felt in years. Stifling the ache, Diana retreated quietly to the back copy room. The faint glow of the fluorescent lights flickered intermittently, casting jumpy shadows against the plain walls. The unmistakable scent of toner filled the air, sharp and almost antiseptic, mingling with the stale aroma of discarded coffee cups left on a nearby countertop. The low hum of the copier was a tired heartbeat in the stillness. Behind the machine, her eyes caught a crumpled, coffee-stained folder shoved carelessly into the wastebasket. The edges bore a label scrawled in her precise handwriting, "Murray Family Trust, Clause D5. The faint, jagged tear of the paper edge whispered of neglect, of being discarded without a second thought. Her throat tightened, but the sight ignited her resolve. That folder held the final trust clause, the keystone to the upcoming hearing, that Madison hadn't bothered to include in the binders she was presenting. The moment was suffocating, yet it sharpened Diana's focus. She retrieved the folder gently from the trash, smoothing out the brittle, stayed edges with trembling hands. She could still feel the residual warmth of coffee on the paper, and the faint smell of ink still clung stubbornly. Her eyes scanned the words once more, committing the details to memory. Clause D5, amendments governing fiduciary responsibilities to sole trusteeship. Her entire body pulsed with urgency. If Madison overlooked that clause, the firm's case could falter disastrously. All the late nights, all the sidelining, led here to this determination. She could not let them fail, not when the truth rested in these pages. A tear slid down her cheek, but instead of drowning in despair, it fueled a quiet fire. Diana folded the folder carefully, clutching it close. This discarded piece of paper was her chance, not just to prove her value, but to uphold the justice she had fought for all her career. Soon, she would have to step back into the spotlight, armed with both resolve and evidence. And when that time came, nothing would be left to chance. Has anyone ever judged you too soon? Tell me what changed their mind. That afternoon, the office hummed with its usual quiet urgency, a mix of sighs, clicking keyboards, and the distant drone of the air conditioning. Diana found a moment of respite in the cramped IT closet, where Kevin, the firm's tech specialist, had pulled aside a battered file he'd spotted tossed recklessly near a copier. His words came in a low voice, barely audible over the hum of servers. "I saw Madison throw this aside this morning," he admitted. Handing the folder carefully to Diana, she traced her fingers over the familiar script on the manila tab. "Murray Family Trust, Clause D5. The edges were frayed from careless handling, and faint coffee stains marred the bottom corner. But inside, the golden lining she'd hoped to find had not been lost. Everything she had painstakingly recorded was there in black and white. Diana's mind raced, recalling the firm's strict policy manual she'd studied only days ago while double-checking case procedures. Every inheritance clause had to be physically accounted for in documentation before being accepted for trial. It was spelled out in bold print under Section 4.3.2. No case proceeding shall exclude fiduciary amendments critical to estate matters. All must be verified and matched with original filing receipts. Her pulse quickened. The thought of the Murray family's trust settlement hanging precariously on the missing clause was a sharp reminder of what was at stake. If Madison's incomplete binder went to the judge, the firm could face everything from client distrust to damaging legal repercussions. Kevin leaned closer, voice gentle but firm. "Look, I know this sounds rough, but you've got the evidence. If you bring this up at the hearing, it could change everything." He paused, then added, a flicker of concern crossing his face. "Just be careful. The firm's politics are a maze, and Madison's not going to back down quietly." Diana nodded, accepting both the file and the weight it carried. She tucked the folder securely inside her bag, the worn leather reassuring against her palm. The deadline loomed. Judge Beckman's review was only a day away, and with it, the moment of reckoning. Failure wasn't an option, but neither was confrontation without preparation. Her thoughts settled briefly on the risks ahead. Standing up now could invite scrutiny, even retaliation. Yet, in that moment of quiet clarity, Diana felt the stirrings of a hidden ally, Kevin, whose hesitant support might just tip the balance. She would need every piece of protocol and policy memorized, every detail accounted for. As the office's fluorescent light flickered overhead, Diana drew a deep, steadying breath. Tomorrow was the day to prove that no one could write her off, not with a file full of facts in her hands, and the determination burning inside. If a moment like this ever hit close to home, I'd love to hear how you found your way forward. The courtroom buzzed with the low murmur of voices as people settled into their seats. The fluorescent lights overhead cast a clinical glow on the polished wooden bench and the tall judge's chair. Diana sat near the corner, clutching the battered manila folder, the one Madison had so carelessly discarded just days before. The label on the edge read clearly, Murray Family Trust, Clause D5. Her knuckles whitened as she gripped it. The final hope resting between those thin pages. Madison stood confidently at the front, poised to hand over the thick binder she'd prepared. The air was taut, charged with anticipation. As she extended the documents toward Judge Beckman, Diana rose quietly but deliberately, her heel tapping softly on the polished floor. The room turned, eyes flicked from Diana to the waiting judge. With steady hands, she stepped forward and placed the worn folder gently on the oversized oak table. "Your Honor," Diana's voice was calm yet resolute, carrying through the hushed chamber. "I'd like to submit this additional document for the Murray Family Trust case." She slid the battered file forward, careful not to draw attention to its coffee-stained edges. Diana cleared her throat and continued. "This includes Clause D5, the fiduciary amendment critical to this estate. According to our firm's protocol, every inheritance clause must be physically accounted for and verified with a time-stamped receipt before trial." She reached into her pocket and pulled out the crisp office receipt, stamped and dated only hours after she'd initially filed the document. Judge Beckman's gaze shifted from the folder to the receipt, then toward Madison's prepared materials. His eyes narrowed as he flipped through the pages quickly. A silence fell over the courtroom, thick and palpable. The judge's brow creased deeply, and finally he looked up, fixing Madison with a stern, unwavering stare. Madison's confident smile faded. A flicker of panic darted through her eyes as her hands tightened slightly over the binder. The judge's voice was measured but sharp. "It appears that critical documentation was overlooked when preparing this case." Such an oversight jeopardizes the integrity of these proceedings and the settlement for the Murray family. The courtroom seemed to lean in, caught in the gravity of the moment. Diana's heart hammered steadily, but her posture remained unwavering. She had stood up not just for herself, but for the clients whose futures hung in the balance. Judge Beckman continued, emphasizing the importance of diligence, regardless of seniority or age, reminding everyone that competence must never be dismissed because of prejudice. As the judge's words echoed, the atmosphere shifted. For the first time that week, Diana felt the weight of respect enter the room, sleeping away the whispers and sneers she had endured. Madison's face drained of color, the power dynamics visibly altered. The hearing resumed with a renewed focus on accuracy and fairness. Diana was quietly ushered to sit back down, but the smiles and subtle nods from a few colleagues spoke volumes. They saw her now. The injustice she faced moments before was met with undeniable validation, and for once, the crucial role she played could not be ignored. When dignity finally speaks, who tends to listen in your world? Judge Beckman's voice resonated across the packed courtroom, steady and clear. Overlooking critical documentation in a trust case is unacceptable, regardless of seniority or age, he declared, eyes sweeping over the faces before him. His words packed weight far beyond the legalities. They carried a stern warning and a call for fairness that no one could ignore. Diana sat upright, the tension in her shoulders easing slightly as she watched Madison shrink beneath the judge's gaze. The junior associate's confident posture faltered, her usual smirk replaced by a flush of embarrassment. She cleared her throat but said nothing, as the judge's next words struck firm. In this firm, and in all proceedings before this court, diligence and attention to detail must be paramount, he continued. Miss Jennings has demonstrated a level of professionalism and vigilance worthy of commendation. Therefore, I am appointing her to supervise all future trust documentation at Larchmont and Brock Law, ensuring no clause, no matter how small, was overlooked again. The room exhaled collectively. Whispers stirred among the attendees, and a few heads nodded in approval. The client, seated near the front, rose and offered Diana a sincere smile and a thankful handshake, their eyes glistening with relief and gratitude. It was a moment Diana had long awaited, but never expected quite so publicly. Mr. Nolan, who had remained quiet through the proceedings, stood then, clapping softly. "Well deserved," he said, his voice carrying through the space. Turning to face his staff, he added, "Let this be a lesson in the dangers of underestimation and the value of experience." As Diana collected her things, a new sense of validation settled around her like a warm glow. Colleagues who had previously ignored her met her glance with a newfound respect, some offering tentative smiles or brief nods of acknowledgement. It was the beginning of a shift, subtle but significant. Madison lingered after the hearing, her embarrassment apparent but tempered by a hint of humility. When their eyes met briefly, there was no mockery, only the wary recognition of someone who had miscalculated. The rivalry was not extinguished, but reshaped, nuanced by the undeniable fact of Diana's competence. Outside the courtroom, the sun filtered through the city's tall windows, casting long shadows that stretched with the fading afternoon. Diana stepped into the light, the crisp air filling her lungs as she realized this battle had not only preserved a client's trust, but reclaimed her own dignity. Justice had prevailed, not with bluster or malice, but through enduring commitment and steady resolve. Diana knew the road ahead would still hold challenges, but today marked a turning point, a moment when standing quietly firm finally changed everything. Back at Larchmont and Brock, Diana stepped through the glass doors, the familiar scent of polished floors and coffee grounds wrapping around her like an old worn blanket. The afternoon sun filtered through the tall windows, scattering warm light across the front lobby. For the first time in a long while, the nods she received from passing colleagues felt sincere, not the faint, distracted gestures she'd grown used to, but genuine acknowledgments of respect. Kevin offered a quiet smile from his desk, and Diana met it with a thankful glance. She slicked out of her sensible charcoal blazer, reviewing the soft, worn navy cardigan beneath. Her faded navy flats, scuffed from years of patient trudging, tapped steadily as she moved towards her workstation. The space felt different somehow, less shadowed, more inviting. Instead of the corner where she usually tucked files unnoticed, she arranged her documents on a sunlit windowsill that caught the breeze through slightly cracked panes. The gentle flutter of papers mirrored the unexpected lightness rising inside her chest. Diana paused to take a breath. The sound of rustling leaves from a nearby tree drifting in the open window. It was a quiet moment of self-care, soft and grounding. Her fingers lingered on the edges of the Murray Family Trust folder, the one that had symbolized both challenge and triumph in the past days. This file was no longer a secret weapon hidden from sight. It was a silent reminder that one's worth was measured by actions, by persistence, by integrity, not by age or whispered doubts. In these simple gestures, Diana realized that dignity was neither loud nor boastful. It was steady as footsteps on well-traveled paths, patient as the sun's slow rise. The office buzz swirled around her, phones ringing, muted conversations, the soft hum of printers. But in the midst of it all, Diana felt anchored by her own quiet strength. From that day forward, associates approached her with questions, invited her opinions, and deferred to her judgment. The office culture began to shift, the invisible barriers gently dissolving. Experience, once overlooked, became a sought-after asset. Diana understood now more deeply than ever that kindness and humility could coexist with tenacity. She had learned that fading away was never the answer. Standing firm, sometimes in silence, could rewrite even the harshest narratives. With a small, contented smile, she arranged the last file on her desk. Outside, a soft breeze played with the curtains, and the city's rhythm carried on, unchanged yet somehow new. This was Diana's new normal, one built on respect earned with grace and resilience. The kind of normal where no one could ever call her old and worthless again. If this story resonated with you, please hit that subscribe button. See you in our next story.